Please subscribe to hear more Cryptid Tales. If you like the story you heard, give us a thumbs up and feel free to leave us a comment. If you'd like to hear your own cryptid encounter on Cryptid Tales, send us an email at cryptidtalesmail@gmail.com. I have never been one for having an interest in the unknown or the paranormal, but when someone you trust tells of an experience from their past, sometimes you have to give the benefit of the doubt. I was reading Your True Tales about a month ago and came across a story that took place in New Jersey on or about the area of Doris Duke Farms. After reading it, my jaw dropped because this story gave the one that I was told some validity. My grandfather told me this story back in 1991, a few years before he passed away. And so it goes. My grandfather worked from the late 1950s to the early 70s as a landscaper on the Duke Estate in Somerset, New Jersey. When he told this story to my sister and me, he was foggy when giving the exact dates, but he was still very sharp and explained it with incredible detail. My grandfather's job was to manicure and care for the lawns in the north section of the property, whatever that meant, and other various duties. He said that in the summer of 1972, one August afternoon, he was told by the head groundskeeper that he would be working overtime and that he was needed because a shipment was being delivered from Wisconsin. They needed about 8 men to unload a crate and to bring it into the garden area. That night the truck arrived, and it was getting late. The men who were asked to stay for overtime were eager to get things done and over with and be on their way. When the truck pulled up, my grandfather said that the crate was about 8 feet tall and about 5 feet wide. When he asked what was inside it, the one in charge said they were exotic trees. What happened next was enough to make half of the team get up and walk off the job and not care about the consequences. When the men started pushing the crate off of the flatbed truck, a blood-curdling scream was unleashed from within the box. All of the men let go of their grip and the crate fell to the floor. As everyone jumped back, realizing that this was anything but a tree, the head keeper did all he could to save the contents' real identity and said that there was a black bear inside of it. While the men were regaining their composure, most of the help walked off the job. They said they didn't want to get hurt or mauled dealing with a wild animal without the proper safety equipment, so off they went, including my grandfather. Only 2 men stayed to finish what they were asked. This is what was told to my grandfather. The 2 remaining men managed to get the load onto a dolly and then drag it into the garden compound. While guiding the crate down the main path, balance was lost and the crate came off the wheels. The crate hit hard enough to crack the side of the crate and loosen the side panel, which fell off and exposed the contents. What the 2 remaining men witnessed that night was enough to make them seek employment elsewhere. What I am telling you was how it was told to me. Inside the crate sat a creature that had the shape of a man, but was anything but a man. They couldn't give a height measurement since the creature was in a sitting position, but they said it was huge. It had the shape of a man with a very large frame, only it was covered with black hair. The creature was strapped down and had shackles on his legs and feet and arms. The face didn't look like a man, but had some human features. The workers said it looked more like a monkey or a gorilla. The hair was extremely long and dirty. At one point, one of the men said they thought that this thing was trying to speak or communicate with words, but all it did was keep on drooling. They were under the impression that the creature was heavily sedated because it couldn't keep its head up straight. It rested its head on its chest. A couple of inches away from the creature's head was an empty water bottle nailed to the wall. On the other side of the creature was an IV stand connected to the wall and stuck to its arm. It might have been used to feed this creature during its transport. One of the oddest parts to this story was that my grandfather was told that this creature was sitting on a rocking chair. I could never understand this. After thinking about it, though, I think it was maybe to prevent this thing from getting cramps during the move. They also said that the odor was overpowering and enough to make anyone pass out. The combined smells of urine, waste, and body odor was rank. My grandfather stuck to his story until the very end. About 2 weeks before he passed away, my sister reminded me to bring it up again and confront him, which I did. There was no need to go over the story again, because we both knew how it went. I just asked him, "Papa, remember the crate you had to move in Jersey?" He just looked at me, smiled, and said, "Of course." I said, "Did you embellish it at all?" He said, "No, there was no reason to. It happened the way I said it happened." I said, "Because now would be the time to tell me." He looked at me and said, "You want to know if I embellished the story. The truth is that I am guilty of the opposite. There was so much that I left out. The story was just the beginning. Remember something. I worked there for 2 more years after that. There are things that a young mind should not hear." I told him, "But I am not a child anymore. I am sure I can handle what it is that you have to say." Grandfather said, "Tomorrow I will finish the story. Come back tomorrow." But there was no tomorrow. Grandfather passed away at 2 a.m. that morning in a New York hospital. My brother-in-law and I were headed east on Lucia Falls Road, northeast, when we saw something on our left, sort of like it might have been a shooting star. It was still light outside, but barely. He thought it might have been a light airplane crashing. He was a medic, so we pulled over to the side of the road and got out of the truck and listened, but heard nothing. No cries for help, no sounds of metal burning, just silence. Thinking we should help if it was a plane down, we worked our way through the brush and trees to where the railroad tracks parallel Lucia Falls Road, and I told him one of us better run back and get a flashlight in case it was a down plane and somebody is hurt. He yelled he was going on ahead to see if he could find the source of the flash of light and look for survivors. At this point, I stopped and turned around real quick to race back to the truck. I have a high-powered spotlight that is portable in the back, and my mind was on hoping the batteries were still good. When I turned to make my way back to the truck, I could swear I saw a big man higher up on the road near the truck just standing there. But I caught my foot, looked down for a minute to get a better grasp on where I was stepping, and when I looked up again, he wasn't there. I called out to him, but got no reply. Limping a little, I finally got to the truck. The batteries were working fine, and it was almost completely dark by this time. I grabbed my wife's cell phone off of the seat, tucked it into my pocket, shouldered a loop of rope just in case, and grabbed the lantern. I don't remember seeing another car on the roadway there, but I remembered wondering where this man had come from that I had seen on my way up from below the apron on the road on my way up to the truck. He was nowhere in sight. I hurried on to catch my brother-in-law and wondered too where he was because by now I was barely finding my way and it was getting darker. I called out to him, but no answer. I moved on slowly toward where I thought I had left him at the railroad tracks and looked both ways on the track but didn't see anything or my brother-in-law. I called out again and listened intently. There was no sound of anything, not wind, not crickets. So I cupped my hands around my mouth and called out my brother-in-law's name in both directions of the railroad tracks. But still I heard nothing, saw nothing, and began to wonder if that man figure up on the road was him a few minutes ago. But I couldn't figure out how he would have gotten there from where I left him. I picked up a rock and placed it in a strategic spot on the rail of the tracks to mark where I should head for the road, and began walking east on the railroad tracks, aiming my lantern to the left and right, going along looking for him. Now I'm thinking something happened to him, because he wasn't answering. Darkness fell quickly as I pressed on, uncertain I was even going in the right direction of the flash that we thought we saw. I don't know how far I walked on those tracks, but my ankle was beginning to hurt, so I stopped to loosen the strings on my shoe and call out for John again. Still no answer, and now I'm growing concerned. Should I go back and wait at the truck or press on? I listened, but heard nothing but the sound of my own breathing. I checked my watch, and it was already after 8 in the evening. I called out for John again, then turned to head back to the truck to phone home when I remembered I had my wife's cell phone in my pocket. I took the lantern and scanned the tracks and the terrain left and right of the tracks as I came back upon the marker rock I had placed on the rails. No sign of John, but maybe he went in the other direction, so I left the marker rock to the road and walked the tracks in the other direction for about 15 minutes, calling out for him all the while. About the only thing I noticed was the quiet. Where was my damn brother-in-law? It's roughly 9 at night by now, and no sign of John, but I didn't want to leave him behind. I sat down and pulled out the cell phone and dialed home. I tried to explain where I was and what had happened, but I couldn't explain where John had wandered off to, and I told the gals that I wasn't leaving here without him. Just as I was about to hang up, I heard footsteps coming and the disturbance of gravel on the railroad ties. I flashed the lantern around and down the tracks where I heard the footsteps and thought I saw John coming. "John?" I yelled out several times. Then I told the girls he was coming and hung up the phone. John looked a mess. "Where you been, buddy?" I asked him. He reached out and put his big arms around my neck and said he was glad to see me. "I didn't know you went in this direction, bud. Where you been and what happened to you?" He just hung on to me and said, "Can we get me back to the truck right now?" I asked him, "Are you hurt?" "No," John replied, "just scared shitless." "What happened? You've been gone over an hour." We started walking back towards where I had the marker rock on the rails. John sort of leaning on me. "Man, you're not going to believe this." "Believe what?" I asked. "What the hell's going on with you, bud?" "I saw something," he said. "Something huge." "Yeah? What, is there a plane crash?" I asked. "I got to sit down," he groaned. "My heart's coming out of my chest, and man, I didn't see any plane." We walked with our arms around one another's shoulders till we got back to my marker rock to the road, sat down in the gravel, and turned off the lantern. John sat there in the dark for a few minutes with his head down between his knees, trying to collect himself. He was visibly shaken. He told me there was something out there. He said, something man-shaped, very tall, but looked like the thing had hair on it. Then I lost enough light to tell much other than that. It just stood off to the side of the tracks in a hulking manner, me facing it and it facing me for a long time. I heard it breathing. I swear I heard the thing breathing, and I froze. Man, I just froze stiff. My mind shut down and I couldn't think of what to do. I thought I was seeing things, he continued. It was something nightmares are made out of, and I don't recall I ever saw anything or a man that big before, and I never want to see anything like that again. I started to back up and run, but I couldn't see well, kept tripping on the rails, cross ties, and kept falling down. I think I'm all skinned up, but let's get home. Back home, he recounted the same story to the girls. He was all cut up on the knees, skinned up and bleeding, with one bad place on the side of his right rib where he said he fell on something, maybe a railroad railing or one of the ties. My brother-in-law is a big man, tall, and he describes this thing he saw as huge and hairy. Then I started wondering about the dark figure I saw up on the road that I called out to when I went back for the flashlights. My son and I went back to the area the next morning and walked 2 miles in either direction but found nothing. No sign of any plane down, no fire, no nothing. From John's description, we thought maybe he had a meeting with a Sasquatch, but we aren't sure. We never did know what the flash of light was. Whatever it was scared him, and he's a seasoned hunter, raised by other seasoned hunters, and he doesn't drink. So I don't know what he saw. I didn't see or hear anything other than the figure on the road, but I believe my brother-in-law did, and he believes it must have been a Sasquatch.